All right, so obviously the college football playoff rankings came out last night. The first inaugural college football playoff rankings in 2024, the first year of the 12-team playoff, the expanded playoff. So we've all been anticipating these original rankings. Everybody thinks what they think about the AP. The AP is meaningless. It just kind of gives us a reference to go by up until the point to where the CFP comes in and starts making their rankings. So I want to give my breakdown, my opinions on 1 through 25, the initial college football rankings, a few predictions as we're going on throughout the rest of the season with some of these teams' schedules, who could potentially be on their way out of the college football playoffs, who could potentially be on their way in, and all of those good things, right? So let's start at the very top, 1 through 5. The top five, I think, to start off with, was at least very predictable, especially with the teams that are involved in it. Now, there's some things that maybe I would have shifted around a little bit that's in there. You got one, Oregon, which everybody would have assumed would have been number one. Oregon's number undefeated. They're rolling through their schedule right now. They have the impressive win versus Ohio State. Everybody knows Oregon, Dylan Gabriel's 35-year-old ass is going to be number one in the country right now. Dan Lanning's everybody's favorite young coach. Oregon's number one, and all signs point to them going undefeated all the way to the Big Ten championship. They got a cold game in Madison, Wisconsin coming up. That's really the only challenge you got going to a cold Camp Randall. You totally anticipate that they go undefeated at least up into the Big Ten championship. Now, moving on, two teams I want to focus on a little bit: Ohio State and Georgia at 2 and 3. Both teams with a loss on their schedule ahead of number 4 Miami, who is undefeated. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you everything that the College Football Playoff Committee rightfully thinks about the ACC and how it's definitely probably the worst Power Four conference that's out there. That includes the Big 12. Big 12 is spicier than the ACC, and I think there's no doubt about it. Now, it is always a little bit subjective because at the end of the day, these teams are playing who's in their conference, and we'll look at a conference and we'll sit there and think, oh, these games are more competitive in Conference A than they are in Conference B. Therefore, Conference A must be better in Conference B. When reality is we don't truly know. Some of this is subjective. Now, Ohio, and my issue with them this whole time is I don't have any confidence in Will Howard. It's a guy that I've watched every year that he was at Kansas State as a Longhorns fan. We played them every year on our schedule. We dominated Will Howard every single time we played them. It doesn't just come down to the reality of like the history of Texas and what he did at Kansas State. I understand there's another world of talent here in Ohio State that he has. And on paper, this was the $20 million roster coming into the season that a lot of people had as their favorite to win the national championship. I had questions coming into the year one because of Will Howard. Quarterbacks in college football are everything, especially when it comes to winning championships. More often than not, you're going to have two of the top three to top four quarterbacks in the country playing in that national championship game. Will Howard is never going to be that. He's never going to be one or two. He's a great value version of what Dak Prescott was at Mississippi State. That's not terrible. It's hilarious to think about it, but it's not terrible. But the reality is he has a ceiling, and I think it shows week in, week out, where this Ohio State team has been in a lot of very close games, and even games that the score doesn't really show how close it was. Go back to the Marshall game where Marshall got across the 50-yard line, I think, on every offensive drive that they had. This Ohio State defense isn't as overpowering as it looked like it was going to be on paper. They don't have one of the top pass rushes in the country. They're not constantly disrupting the backfield. Their secondary is good, but not as good as we thought it would be. Their safety play is very good, but their corners can get challenged down the field. I anticipate that happens in the coming weeks. And so you got those two teams that played each other. They came in with top four rankings, and so obviously Ohio State's a darling of the media, and others they're going to be ranked that high. But Ohio State's got Indiana and Michigan on the docket. And I think that they're at least going to lose one of those games. I know everybody's going to laugh off Michigan, and they think the way that they think about them, but match styles make fights. And college football is not just copy and paste week to week. So and so beats so and so. So for sure, this team would beat that team. That's how we always think about it. But styles make fights. And there's that elephant in the room with Crying Ryan and this Ohio State culture that they have not been able to match Michigan's physicality for the last 3 years, and that's still going to be an issue in this game. I think Ohio State's beat up offensive line and already questionable offensive line is going to struggle against the 3 first-round draft picks that they're going against that defense on Michigan's defensive line. And then you got the Indiana team that they got ranked at 8th right now behind Tennessee and Penn State, which blows my mind. People want to talk about Indiana's strength of schedule. Well, all they've done is beat everybody by 2 touchdowns or more all year long. They went and dominated the Nebraska team, which is fair to say has been underwhelming, but they pushed Ohio State to the absolute brink. And barring a few terrible pass interference calls and Ohio State flags that came into that game, Nebraska might have won that game. Well, Indiana handled them start to finish, wasn't even close. They've handled everybody on their schedule start to finish, and that's all you could do is play your schedule. They got Michigan this week, and it'll say a lot. Like I said, we're disappointed in the outcome of all of Michigan's games so far and their record and their quarterback issues as the defending national champion, and that's all fair. But that's still a team with a lot of NFL football players on it. If Indiana comes in and handles Michigan and beats them by more than 2 touchdowns the way they beat everybody else, I'm absolutely taking Indiana to beat Ohio State. This Ohio State team's a vulnerable team. They got weapons. They got Jeremiah Smith. The running backs room, although they had a very good game against Penn State, who's not good, we could sit here and act like they are every single year. They're below elite, and they're going to continue to be below elite. It's a team that probably should have lost to USC, who's not a very good football team. They almost lost to Bowling Green or whoever it was early in the year. They do this every single year. They can't beat the one team on their schedule. James Franklin handicaps his quarterbacks in these big games. He doesn't let it loose. He doesn't, take any risk whatsoever, and that's what happens. This Indiana team, I think, is a very, very scary team. And then if Ohio State loses that game, what are we talking about here? This is one of the questions I have. What if you have a 2-loss Ohio State, a 2-loss Georgia, a 2-loss Alabama? Potentially, I don't think it's going to happen, but obviously I'm biased, a 2-loss Texas. Throw in there a 2-loss Notre Dame. They have kind of an easy schedule on the way out, so I think they would be eliminated. But you're going to have a group of massive brands that have 2 losses. First, you get your conference champions that are going to take 4 of the playoff spots up. And then you're going to have the conference runner-ups, which at least you would imagine at least 3 of those get in. What about a situation where you got BYU, who's undefeated right now? They look great. They roll through all the way to the Big 12 championship undefeated. They lose the Big 12 championship in a very competitive game, say against a team that they've already beat once, or against a very hot Colorado team, and it comes down to the wire. Well, obviously, Colorado could shake this entire thing up with winning the Big 12. They're going to get in. They're going to get the bye. I think BYU absolutely at that point deserves to be in. So that's a team that's in. That's going to bump out a Georgia or a Bama, which Bama would be the easy pick to bump out right now, or just a major brand that has 2 losses that in the preseason you're probably coming into the season thinking if they get through their schedule with 2 losses, they're into the playoffs. So that's a discussion. Georgia is who I'm down on. The biggest reason I was down on Georgia coming into the year is the biggest reason I'm down on them making the playoffs right now where we stand. I actually predicted that Georgia would miss the playoffs in the preseason. Biggest reason being Carson Beck's too horny to be a playoff quarterback. He's too horny to be a winning quarterback. I got 3 rules. You can't coach and call plays horny, you can't recruit horny, and you can't play quarterback horny. There's a lot of other things you can do horny, and it's just innocent fun. You can play defense horny. You can play tight end horny. You can even play receiver horny. But you can't play the quarterback position horny. He's got his horny history on the Snapchats. He's dating one of the Cavender twins, him and Jake Ferguson. Like I said, Jake Ferguson's a tight end. He's got the eye black thing. He's got the arm sleeve. He's driving a Lambo truck or whatever he's doing. This is reckless, horny behavior by a quarterback. And I actually watched, he has like a 17 to 11 touchdown to interception ratio. I watched every interception today on a film breakdown on YouTube. And you see some of those throws, and some of these throws are like, he's thinking about ass and tits and not who he's throwing the ball to. He doesn't see linebackers. He doesn't see safeties. It's a major issue, and I think he's playing beyond a replacement level. His touchdown to interception ratio, and I don't fact check. This isn't a fact checking show, never will be. I think I saw in the SEC it's 8 to 12 touchdown to interceptions. Everybody else is getting replaced. My question with Georgia is Rashada not showing enough behind him to make this move because he's not getting drafted anymore. Throw that out of the window, at least not high. And I'm very hard pressed to think a guy with 12 plus interceptions has got to get drafted, period. It's not a guy that has the Quinn Ewers arm ability. He's got arm talent, he's got arm strength, but he's not a put it wherever I want to put the ball type of guy, generational arm talent. And he's shown you what it is. His first 17 games, I saw Josh Pate talking about how it's 2 different worlds. Well, I think Georgia got by on the weak SEC East for too long, and now they have this schedule that it has, and it's showing the vulnerability of Georgia. They're vulnerable. I think that they lose this game to Ole Miss this week. I think that Jackson Dart and the Ole Miss team possesses the things that is going to challenge that defense. One, it's the first year that Ole Miss is going to be able to hold up front against like the caliber of a Georgia team, physicality wise. And then two, Jackson Dart has the ability to extend plays with his legs, which Georgia has shown already this year defensively makes them more vulnerable. If you're able to extend plays with your legs the way Jalen Milroe did, the way Lagway was doing to extend plays, get those corners tested down the field, which have shown that they can get challenged and tested down the field. I think Ole Miss is going to expose a little bit of that. I think Tennessee is going to expose a little bit of that. They will at least lose one of those games, if not both of those games, in my opinion. So you move on beyond that. Texas looking forward. Texas is in a beautiful spot where I think that 5 seed might be the best seed in the house. Because as of right now, the 5 seed would be playing the ACC champion, which none of us are sure is going to be a very good football team. Talking about winning national championships. When you look at this list and you talk about who all could come from this list and be a national champion, I've seen a lot of people say things like there's 9 teams. I couldn't disagree with that more. I think there's a lot of parity, but when you look at your national champions, there's 2 things that you need. You need a really good defense, you need a really good quarterback. So I've already eliminated Georgia from winning the national championship because of the quarterback situation. You can eliminate Bama with their defense. You can eliminate an LSU with their defense. You can eliminate an A&M with their offensive situation. Anybody that has a very questionable quarterback situation, Ohio State, I don't think Will Howard can win a national championship. That's off of my list. There's really going to come down to it. It's going to be Oregon, Texas. Look through the list here. Tennessee, if they're dialed, that defense is elite. It's really, really good. Uh, Colorado defensively, teams like that where you can maybe put up a lot of points, like you're just going to crumble. You're going to have 3 to 5 teams that can really win the national championship. In my eyes, I would put Ole Miss up there. Ole Miss is a team that lost games that we didn't think they should have. I think a lot of us have bailed out, but they're going into a game this week against Georgia where you've got every opportunity in the world to change the whole narrative. They're the number 3 team in the country. They're rated ahead of the undefeated ACC leader in Miami. They're rated ahead of Texas. They beat Texas by 15 in Austin. You win this game and you go undefeated the rest of the way, you're going to avoid the SEC championship loss that probably would have come your way. You got an experienced quarterback. You got an elite offensive play caller. And you got a defense that can win you a championship. They're not the best defense in the country, but they can get after the quarterback, and they're big, they're physical, they're fast. They can handle it. I think you're looking at 4 or 5 teams on this list of 25 that can arguably win a championship. I think you're looking at a few teams like Notre Dame, which is getting by on brand alone. How is Notre Dame better than SMU? SMU's only loss is to number 9 BYU, ranked ahead of Notre Dame, rightfully so. Notre Dame has the worst loss out of the top 12, at the very least the top 12, losing to NIU. And SMU has gone on to beat teams like Louisville, who just stomped Clemson. They beat Boston College, who was giving teams trouble earlier in the year. They've kind of fizzled out. That's a questionable thing. That seems kind of like an AP type of ranking. That goes to show you Notre Dame, if they're anywhere in the ballpark, they're getting in the playoffs off brand alone. Probably one of the biggest fan bases in all of sports Notre Dame has. And then I think November is a month that's going to expose a lot of teams. LSU is going to get exposed. That's a team that, they got a win over Ole Miss, where Ole Miss was the better team for 4 quarters. They caught Ole Miss in a very vulnerable spot on the schedule in Baton Rouge at night. It was very tough. They ended up pulling out a squeaker. They should have lost to South Carolina. A terrible penalty is why they won that game. There's no question about that. And then they're moving forward in a game where I think they lose by more than 10 against Alabama this week, because I think Alabama has the ability to expose their vulnerabilities defensively more than LSU can do to Alabama. Now, LSU has a high-powered passing attack versus a weak secondary at Alabama, but they also got a quarterback that's way too reckless with the ball. It's going to give it away a little bit, and they're one-dimensional. So Alabama's game plan and everything will be designed around stopping that passing attack. So I find a way that Alabama gets turnovers and gets more stops, whereas I don't think LSU is capable of stopping a dual threat quarterback. And that how that contributes to the run game and will expose them down the field of Ryan Williams getting one-on-one situations down the field that he otherwise hasn't been getting. All right. So that's one loss. And then I forget who else they finish off with. But it's not an easy slate to close out the year. They got Oklahoma at the end of the year, whereas, we think what we think about Oklahoma, But the reality is, playing them the last game of the year where they're going with Jackson Dart, they might have a few more things figured out. And I think that LSU defense is just bad. Bad defense is bad defense. And who else do they have? I think they got Vanderbilt. Um, Let me see. I got their schedule pulled up. They got Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, and Florida. Florida's a rivalry game. Florida is the team that's playing again, like Oklahoma, way better than early in the year, where still should very much be a win, but it's not the automatic win. And I do think that they lose to Vanderbilt. Again, you're playing dual threat quarterback. If Lagway's good to go, he might play this week against Texas, which I think is a little bit crazy. You might have a Byron Leftwich situation where the offensive linemen are carrying them down the field after he completes a pass. But if he's good to go here pretty soon, then he's good to go against LSU. So I'm talking about dual threat quarterback with the ability to expose you. Pavia is going to expose them, and actually Tim Beck and that slow mesh that they run going to give them a lot of problems. I don't see if they do a good job stopping it. And then they roll out that stupid cockamamie like defensive I formation that they run and stuff like that, giving me Todd Orlando vibes. LSU right now is doing in year 4 what is a year 1 job in trying to save and fix that defense. So I don't got good vibes on LSU. This is vibes over everything with me. I think they get exposed in November. I think it would be a hilarious thing. You know, nobody is happier than the college football playoff committee than Florida State absolutely collapsing. From the moment they exiled them of the playoffs last year to now, Florida State's just gotten dominated every single week. They look terrible. It's a disaster of a program. I think they should fire everybody and restart. But this is one of those things. This Notre Dame team is the type to show up and lose to Florida State. That'll be Florida State's one win this year. You know, that's like the football gods. Ball don't lie. They shouldn't be ranked this high type of situation, and that's the only reason I got my eye on that. There's Alabama, they're through the thick part of their schedule, whereas if things work out, say Georgia goes on and they lose to Tennessee and Ole Miss, and that possibility, Alabama's going to slide their way into this. How does the SEC championship shake out if there's so many 2-loss teams and 3-loss teams? Those tiebreakers are going to be fun to look at. Common opponents like Alabama beating Georgia is going to really play into their favor when it comes down to the end of the year, and then Georgia maybe have the same record and you're looking at that Big 12 situation that I was talking about where BYU goes undefeated, then loses to somebody, and 2 Big 12 teams get in. That's a situation where I see a big dog like Georgia missing the first Big to the 12 team playoff. So that's really my thoughts on the 12 team playoff so far. It's very exciting. It didn't really surprise me the way it went, but I think it's all going to work itself out, and college football's never been a better position. Those week 1 matchups look exciting as hell. If it ended today, it'd be Alabama coming to Austin, and then if Texas goes on, I love that matchup for Texas. They would go on to play Miami in the next round. That's 2 easy dubs as a Longhorn fan, the way I'm looking at it right now, going all the way into the semifinals. I don't have the graphic pulled up, but there was some really exciting matchups. I think that first round is going to be like an NFL wildcard round. Like, in my opinion, as a football fan, that's always my favorite part of the playoffs is the wild card round. It's the upsets, it's the closest games, it's exciting. You get weather involved. You're going to have some cold ass first round playoff games. I'm just excited to see all that. Excited to see the way it shapes out, and I think it'll all work itself out. That's my thoughts on the college football playoff inaugural ranking.